let's talk about what I think needs to be the first step and the most important step in nationwide police reform. So, the first thing that needs to be done, and this is going to take a long time, this is an arduous fight, but it's the best way to really get reform and hold police accountable, is police unions. Police unions are the problem. This is the foundation that allows police to get away with murdering people in the streets, with abusing their power. It's because the unions are so strong that they're not held accountable for their actions. Many police unions, which donate a lot of money to political campaigns or to smear campaigns, to smear a politician that they want the opposition to win. And what makes police unions a whole lot different than, let's say like the union of like UPS or something like that, is you and I can't opt out of policing. You can't opt out of the police in your city. They police your city. They're going to show up when you call 911, when there's a crime. We don't have the choice, right? So police have a very distinct difference than other professions and other unions. So they also hold a lot of sway in that city. They're vital to the function of the cities that they police. If a police union has so much power that they can go on strike, for instance, or they can reduce the work, maybe they can slow the workload, which they've done before, where arrests drop and traffic citations drop because, the union isn't happy with a decision that was made by, let's say, a mayor. These are powers that directly affect everyone else in their community, in the city, who really have no say over what goes on in the union and how it is carried out, which is completely unfair. And police also have the authority in the streets over people's freedoms, and in some cases people's lives. So it's very different from just a regular privatized union. This is a public service. This is a public good that affects everyone. I mean, for instance, I'm sure many of you saw the video of the two officers who pushed the elderly man to the ground in Buffalo. He ended up smacking his head on the pavement and was bleeding out of his ears. Well, the Buffalo Union president stood behind his officers and said, quote, "They were simply following orders." That's insane. Okay? And then they actually released a statement saying that the man tripped. Like, we saw the video, guys. There's video of it. We saw that he didn't trip. We saw that two men pushed an elderly man and he ended up falling to the ground. And then you see a human moment where one of the officers actually wants to stop and help him, but another officer pulls him away and is like, "Whoa, what are you doing? You can't help that guy." This is just reprehensible behavior. There was another dispute in New York years ago where officers were killed. There was a dispute between de Blasio and the officers, and the police union basically had a de facto work slowdown, like I said, and arrests were down and tickets were down. And this affects the entire community, because maybe crimes are actually being committed that should be stopped, that should be intervened by the police. But since they get their panties in a bunch and the union is so strong, that may not happen. You can't have that. And then they use great language for their police unions too, like one of the largest, it might be the largest one in the nation, called the Fraternal Order of Police. Ooh, it sounds real strong, real distinct. It sounds, yeah. But it's really just a police union that strong arms its way and has so much power over the community, over the mayors and the politicians in which the communities they serve, and then directly affect the people they're supposed to be protecting and serving. I mean, ask yourself this. Chauvin in Minneapolis, who killed George Floyd, he had 17 complaints on his record for being an officer. 17 complaints. I don't know about you, but in any line of work, no matter where you work, if you have a fraction of that many complaints, you're gone. You're gone, and rightfully so. And what keeps guys like this around are the unions. They have too much power. And in many cases, sometimes when an officer gets fired from the force, they can then appeal. The union and the officer can appeal and actually win their job back for acts as egregious as the one in New York. I'm sure everyone remembers Eric Garner. Daniel Panatello, the officer involved in that, in Eric Garner's death, when he was fired, the force immediately appealed his reinstatement and threatened a work slowdown. You can't allow that to happen. And then a lot of times the mayors and the politicians of the cities, they get strong-armed into doing these things, because then the police union will spend money against them on political runs. They'll give money to their opponent. They'll make them look like they're weak on crime. They're soft on crime, when really no, they're not soft on crime. They just want to perhaps hold the police, the criminal police, accountable. They're actually not soft on crime. They're strong on crime, regardless of whether or not the person has a badge on them or not. Police unions also have very high membership rates. They have very high membership rates. Those funds allow them to do things like, block reforms by donating lots of money to certain political officials who will do their bidding, or who will sign the sweet contract with them. And speaking of contracts, it's pretty simple to look up the contract of the police in your city. All you gotta do is go to Google, search whatever city or county you live in, type in the county name and then police contract, and you can find it. A lot of times you'll find in the disciplinary section of it, you'll see how it says, no officer can be fired or disciplined without just cause. Well, a lot of times just cause is a methodical, planned out investigation behind closed doors done by the investigators and the union. And the unions have such strength that they've been able to push these investigations, these just cause, behind closed doors, so that the public doesn't see really what just cause is, but we all know what it is. And then, you have presidents of certain unions who seem to really just be terrible people. Like the Minneapolis union president, Bob Kroll. He said, when the officers who killed George Floyd were fired without due process, which is just cause, behind closed doors, involving the union, when they were fired, he said it was, quote, despicable behavior. That's despicable behavior. Yeah. Firing them for being judge, jury, and executioner in the middle of the street. He also, in the same letter, said that the protesters who were protesting the situation were, quote, a terrorist movement. You'd also be happy to know that Kroll himself has 29 filed complaints on him when he was an officer. So what do we do about this? Well, you have to, again, Google search your city, your county, and the police union contract. You'll have to read through it some, and then you'll have to find out when the contract expires. And you'll have to go to these meetings and petition and lobby and talk to your politicians in your local area who are going to negotiate the terms of these contracts with the union. And this has to be done nationwide. This has to be done very fervently as well. This is a long fight. The unions are strong. They're too strong. That is the point of this. So, it's a long battle, but it's the right battle. It's how we get accountability in the police force. It's how people, officers who have, a dozen complaints on them for how they're treating human beings in the street, don't continue to have a job. It's how, people who, like the officers who killed Daniel Shaver, aren't then receiving a pension and walking free after murdering him. It's the unions that allow this to happen. And I've gone over how it's very different from a privatized union like a UPS union. Okay, you can't opt out of policing. They have people's freedoms and sometimes lives in their hands. We can't allow them to go on strike or do work slowdowns because it affects the entire community. We need to crush police unions into smithereens. They cannot be unionized. That's the first step to police reform and getting better police on the streets and police who actually want to protect and serve.